With anesthesia.
We'll give our friends some time to come into the room here. Good afternoon and welcome. I am Dr. Jamie Mathias, Executive Director of the TLSBA, the Texas Latino School Boards Association. And today we are drawing to a close the first 8 webinars of our organization, exploring the lies of Texas. You can find all of the research that has been attached to this webinar series at our website, which is tlsba.org/research. Again, that's tlsba.org/research. And we have with us again today, Mr. George Scott, a former trustee of the Katy ISD Board of Trustees and also a former director of the Texas Association of School Boards. Mr. Scott, how are we doing today?
Doing well, very excited in some ways that we've reached this point, but kind of melancholy a little bit because from this point forward, we have to find help to take it to the next level. And I would like to say before we get started, I've referenced it in the past, what the Texas Latino School Boards Association has done and what you have done is for the first time in human history, which only counts from about 1990, but it is for the first time in history, allowed the story of systemic deception harming disadvantaged children to be told cohesively. Many will say we've thrown too much data, and I can understand that argument, but what we started with was a commitment to create a document that hopefully we could take when this first series was over and go find what I've called that audience of one, that audience of one civil rights firm, that audience of one superintendent or one philanthropist who values what we value more than they do making meaningless contributions to political types, be they Republican or Democrat, because liberals and conservatives, each in their own different way, have created and acquiesced to what we have documented. And your organization has performed a historic service. More, I think I may appreciate it more than you do. I really do, because I have had for the last 8 weeks an opportunity to say things that I've always said, but never had a chance to say in a cohesive way that gives us an opportunity to go to that media outlet, go to find support to take it to the next level. If we can take the results of this last 8 weeks and we can take it to the next level because we find support, we will find a way to make change, not just talk about change, but to make change. That's what's at stake for the next 2 to 3 weeks as we extrapolate from this.
Well said, Mr. Scott. And so today we are jumping into an exploration of how it is that the top 20 Latinx-serving ISDs in Texas are serving our Latinx and at-risk students. We see on this screen who those 20 districts are. And Mr. Scott, I just have to say that you whet our appetite a week ago, and so we are on the edges of our seat. You had suggested that today you'd be sharing with us some new data that you've been bringing together and exploring. So lead us off. Tell us what it is that you've been discovering.
This is called the bottom line. You know, if Texas equity was in such good shape, why does this table reflect a different picture? The ramifications of what the Texas Education Agency doesn't just stop at the diploma night. They carry it forward in their lives. And what you see here is a 4-year track of how students by ethnicity and economic disadvantage did on the SAT, ACT college testing. Now, this is not all students. This is students that enroll in Texas, and it's reported by the Higher Education Coordinating Board. But as I've used the metaphor many times, this is not a Florida exit poll. Okay, this is a substantial, this is like more of a census than a poll. And so what you see is that a lot of students are taking the college entrance test. You'll see in another table we're going to do, a lot are knocking on the door and going in. You're going to see a follow-up table in just a minute that puts this in even starker context. But here's what's happened in SAT, ACT testing. And the reason we went back 3 years to 14-15, something big happened in SAT, ACT testing that affected the results of 2017-18. The College Board changed the test from the structure it had been for, hell, I'm 72 and I took the old-fashioned one. You know, the used to test reading, writing, and math. 800 plus 800 plus 800 is 2,400. It was on a scale of 2,400. And I'm not going to apologize for getting into the weeds. This is just the polygraph of what they did. So when they changed it and combined reading and math, they went from a 2,400 criterion, in effect, reading and math, the old reading and math, to a 1,600 criterion that had a combination. So what happened is that the state absolutely, positively did not make a full statistical correlation change as to the percent of students. It said we're meeting the criterion on the college entrance test. All right, so let's look at the state. You see Latinx 63% to 72% from 14-15 to 17-18% tested. That's a lot. You see 11.7% to 10.6% to 10.7% at criterion, but in 17-18, bing, you got, all of a sudden you have 24.6 of the Latinx students at criterion on college entrance. That is because the state did not make a full, complete, and correlated change in who and how it reported at criterion. So what you see is that even when they're not telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, the story is still tragic. The story is still tragic.
Mr. Scott, help us to understand the numbers that we're seeing. So if, for instance, if we were to focus our eyes, say, on African-American students.
Okay.
And I'm looking at the center group of them, that's testers / criterion. And if we were to start from the bottom toward the top of those, in 2014, 2015, the testers and criterion there, we see 8.2% of African-American students. Tell us what that 8.2% represents.
8.2% of the African-Americans who actually took the test, 8.2% were at criterion, period.
Got it.
Okay.
So 8.2% of the African-American students who took the test were at criterion. And then the next year, 7.9% were at criterion in 2015, 2016.
And then 8.5. And then the next year, 8.5.
And then,
but then 17, okay, I'm sorry.
As our eyes go across the 2017, 2018 line, all of these numbers jump radically. So you're suggesting there was a change in the state's a loosening of standards, or how would you?
No, I'm not suggesting that. I'm not suggesting that. I'm saying that.
Okay.
I'm asserting that. Okay. Does it make sense when 8.7% are said to be mastering a college entrance test, that all of a sudden the academic Red Sea parts and 20% the next year? Now let's keep it in context. Okay, that is a huge jump. But even at 20% of the students who took it, that means 80% were not at criterion. So I can understand. You don't have to be Jethro Bodine, psychometrician, to understand this. Okay, this is understandable. But the main thing is, what we've talked about a lot are consequences. We have low below grade level performance in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in particular. It takes the 3rd, 4th, and the 5th grade for Spanish testing to kind of work its way into that system. We have very, very low performance in English 1 and English 2, thousands and thousands of students statewide failing English 1, failing English 2, taking it again, and 80 and 90% of the students who failed it once are failing it again. And then of the students that are taking it the first time, of the at-risk, the Latinx, the African-American, the economically disadvantaged, we have high failure rates in STAR on the context of below grade level. What I'm saying is, even if you take them and you just say, okay, I'm not going to pay any attention to the big jump. 2017-18 is as good as it gets, and 2007-18 is still a human tragedy. Yeah. But that's what this table shows. Okay. And we're going to look at some more again. But I mean, if you look at economically disadvantaged, okay, if you look at the state, 16, 16, 16, 28. Now remember, the criterion of the testers are the testers who actually took the test. And I have this thing, I have this point of view is the criterion of grads is extremely important because it gives you very valuable context. But what does it say when in 2017-18, 77.5% of the African Americans took the college entrance test, and even in the state's numbers, 80% of those that took it, 80% of 77% didn't meet the criterion. It explains the dropout rates that we've talked about. Yeah. It explains the sad and tragic GPA rates of students in the first year of college. It explains the college debt that students who drop out of college have. It explains the remediation. We're going to talk about a test in a minute that clicks in remediation. This table explains so much about the systemic dishonesty of the Texas accountability system driven by STAR testing now.
And so, Mr. Scott, every time that you produce a fantastic table like this, we try to help the visual learners among us to be able to visualize it. So Carlos on our team took the numbers in this table and tried to put them into a bar chart. So here we're trying.
I understand them better. I understand my own name, but I understand them better when I see his tables. I mean, his graphs. It's fantastic.
Tell us what it is that you see here as we see the adjustment from 2017 to 2018.
Well, it shows that Asian and white students had a higher percent of students taking the SAT and the ACT, and a higher percent scoring at criterion. Okay. Even Asians bumped a little bit on that, and even the white students bumped a little bit with this change. But even before, there was a dramatic equity gap between students that are statistically dominated by children of economic affluence and not disadvantaged, who are statistically more white, who are statistically more Asian. You just see these dramatic equity gaps. That's what this is.
Yeah. Incredible. Are we ready for the next table, Mr. Scott?
Sure.
Actually, before we get to the next table, so this is taking a look at the SAT and ACT results by race and ethnicity. I think what we want to do is just pause here and applaud those districts that are helping to make the SAT and ACT available to students. We see, for instance, in the Dallas ISD, how the Dallas ISD is making sure that students are taking the SAT or the ACT. El Paso, Fort Worth, the same, but we see a large percentages of students who are not meeting the state's criterion.
The state has a vested interest in the higher percent of students who take the college entrance test, because the percent of student testers, at least it was up, I don't know if it's changed in the last couple of years, but historically, the percent of national merit scholarships that are awarded, like for the PSAT, and I mean, which is a correlated test, high percent take the PSAT as well. So there is a vested motivation for more and more students taking the test. And then there's just a sad asterisk that we can put on this. Most people don't look at this. If it weren't for the Texas Latino School Boards, this is what I said earlier, you've created, that's a photograph. What the last 8 weeks has been is a movie that takes us all the way through it. Now, it's our job to see if we can take that movie and convince one or more of what that movie says so that we can deal with this. The red is bad. The red is bad.
Yeah. The next bar chart is simply the same, but for the top 20 districts that are alphabetically from Houston to Isleta. We ready for the next table now?
Yep.
Now, Mr. Scott, we see here that you've pulled together data on AP, Advanced Placement, and IB, International Baccalaureate programs. Tell us what you discovered here.
All right, it's very important. You can't put everything in a table. I made the table. Carlos puts beautiful graphs together on the tables, but you just can't put everything in a table. What needs to be said here to put in context is, this doesn't accrue to the benefit of the state, incidentally. I'll go ahead and give away the ending. But the AP IB courses are rigorous. Okay, you get college credit if you score at criterion on AP IB. My son, my daughter, we were very well aware of it, and they started their university careers with a lot of hours in the bank. Okay, so it's not to say, so someone sitting out there say, well, this is tough. It's hard. You know, this is a very aggressive test. Yes, that's true. But the reality is that the state of Texas and member school districts push a lot of students into the AP IB program. And maybe episodically and in some areas somewhat systemically, you can make a good cause for that. But the bottom line is, just because a student is in an AP course and in math, 3.9% of the students in the 11th and 12th grades were at criterion, or another way to state it, the way I like to state it, for the state, all students, let me get my eyes focused. Okay, 4.1% of the, let's take this shift to science, 4.1% of the state's 11th and 12th grade took a science-based AP IB test.
Okay.
And met criterion. 38% who took it did bad, meaning 70% or 60+% did not make criterion. And so what this table does, it goes every grade, every subject, all ELA, math, science, social studies, okay? AP IB participation, the students who took the test, making it, and what was that as a correlated percentage of the entire student population. Here's the bottom line. Lots of numbers. You can lose your focus on this. Here's what that table means. The state of Texas is pushing kids into AP/IB courses because the press release could say 40% of our kids took an AP/IB course. I want to see the press release that says 3.4% were at Criterion for African Americans.
Yeah.
That's a different news story. Yeah. What you and I have chosen to focus on is not the news story that says how many were taking the test, but of those who were taking the test, what percent were at Criterion on a national standard? And then, importantly, what did that represent of the total cohort by ethnicity? And there is no interpretation of these numbers that allow the state to claim that all of this is a result of the excellence of the STAR testing program. They don't get to say that.
Interesting. So every time we see lots of numbers on a table, we try to find a way to visualize them. What we see here then is that those in green, the green bars are the percentage of graduates who are taking AP or IB, advanced placement or international baccalaureate classes. And the criterion here is that according to the TEA website, you need to score a 3 on the AP exam or a 4 on the IB exam.
No, it's so 3, 4, or 5 on. Oh, you're correct. I'm sorry.
Here we go.
Yes, a 3, 4, 5, but the 3 is the cut score. You're exactly right.
Here we go. So anyone in green has scored a 3 or higher on an AP exam or a 4 or higher on an IB exam. Anyone in red was part of an AP or IB course, but failed to score a 3 on the AP exam or a 4 on the IB exam.
It's an aggressive curriculum, okay? But tell me what, just taking it back, taking a notch back, tell me what high grade level and mastery on end of course algebra means in the context of this. Tell me what high grade level and mastery on end of course history means on this. Tell me what high level of grade level or mastery on end of course algebra means on this. It doesn't connect. The dots don't connect.
Well, when we go to the second half of the alphabet from Houston through Isleta, we just want to give a shout out to those districts that are making AP and IB courses available to students. For instance, here we see in the far San Juan Alamo ISD, the large percentages of Asian and white and Latinx students who are joining those AP and IB courses. But what we also see is the large percentages of them who take the AP and or IB exams and who are not meeting the state criteria of a cut score of 3 on an AP exam or a 4 on an IB exam.
Yeah, that's it. And let me, I can talk about Katy and talk about Houston. You notice that Houston has a fairly high percent of students taking AP and IB classes and meeting state criterion. If you just go down the roll of high schools, okay, which I've done, and you look at the high schools that are concentrated, the magnet schools, the old magnet schools, all right, Billy Reagan years ago copied New York or somewhere, and he created the magnet school program, High School of Visual and Performing Arts, Law Enforcement Academy, DeBakey Health Professionals. All school districts, a lot of school districts do that now. I don't know as many do it with as much sophistication as Houston. It doesn't surprise me at all that in that one instance that we're seeing high performance, and that is Asian and white students, right? The one on the left and the second one.
Correct.
That doesn't surprise me at all. Not a bit. So, and Katy is basically the same thing. Katy is a very changing district. what makes Katy, and I'm not an economist, but I've lived here and I've lived adjacent. I mean, I've observed adjacent. I think what makes Katy different is there is a it is Latinx students are the number one demographic in Katy ISD now, period. Okay. African Americans are down the chart a little bit, as they didn't use. Asians and whites are close. But what you see in Katy is you see a lot of reasonably affluent African Americans, Hispanics, living in that are not economically disadvantaged. And they're going to schools, whether it's at Morton Ranch or Seven Lakes, two different schools, and they're doing very well. Again, we keep reemphasizing all the data that we show is focusing on the low performance of the economically disadvantaged. We have to say it at least once or twice every webinar that the same data that we're using to show this profound, tragic problem simultaneously proves that it doesn't have anything to do with ethnicity. We need to say that and say it and say it again, because that's what some of this data that we're looking at now shows.
And for me, Mr. Scott, what makes these bar charts even more sobering is the fact that the data that you have pooled are from pre-pandemic times. So this is from 2018. We can only imagine what the data would look like for, say, 2021 or 2022.
Let me make a projection. I used to be on the Harris County Hospital District Board of Managers. I wasn't well like there because I lobbied for a return of the 7.5-cent tax rate that the commissioners court took away. But let me play medical guy here. It is highly likely, I can't prove it yet, but I am cynical enough to believe that the 2022 results that we're going to see on STAR may be the object of an academic pandemic. There are so many ways to cajiggle. That's a word. To cajiggle 3, 4, 5, 6 questions. I have no confidence in what the 2022 results will show until I've seen them. I can put in selected public information requests, and I can do behind the scenes internal analysis, because I know, because it's happened in the past, that the state of Texas, it's not hard to adjust the rigor of the test and make the test easier while you're claiming it harder. Sure. One thing is the writing. I mentioned this last time. The 1819 is absolutely justified that we picked out that year because of the non-pandemic. 20 was a bust. 1819 was a bust. 2021 was a bust. And we have no idea what this year is going to be. So our selection of 1819, everything that happens in 2022 will be put in the context of the academic integrity of the analysis that the Texas Latino School Board has done for 1819. Trust me on that one.
Tremendous. So we've taken a look now at SAT, ACT, and now at APIB courses. That means that the one indicator that's left is the TSI, the Texas Success Initiative. Mr. Scott, tell us what we have in this table.
This is remarkable. Just say that. If we want a recording, I might say something else. The TSIA test is a test that the TEA does not give. That's important. The TEA, or the member school districts, will administer the test to its students. The first thing that we start with here is these are graduates. These are students who are going to get a degree. All right. But the College Board has created, and it's long had, I think the original version was TASP. I'm not 100% sure on the lineage, but what we have right now is the Texas Success Initiative Assessment, and the state of Texas wants to give students who graduate from public education a separate test as a truth meter, as a polygraph on whether or not they are really prepared for higher education. Now, I'm not making an all-encompassing statement, but I'm making a substantially encompassing statement. For the first time in my career, which goes back a very long way, the Texas Education Agency's department that deals with the TSIA assessment has not returned my call, despite my urging. And I don't know if there's a coincidence or what, but here's the importance of TSIA. They've graduated. They want to go to college. But the Higher Education Board says, wait a minute. We think you need a test to determine whether or not, when you enroll in a higher education facility, institution, whether or not you need to be sitting in remediation classes. So what do we see? We see high grade level rates in history, high grade level rates on end of course STAR, algebra, high grade level rates in history. We see high levels of students taking the SAT test. But here's the underlying truth. 58.8% of all the graduates in 17-18 took the TSIA test. 59% of the African Americans, 64% of the Latinx, 52% of the white, 44.5% of the Asian, and 62.7% of the economically disadvantaged. This is straight from the Tapper report. As you know, you've double checked on me, and you know I pull these numbers right out of the Tapper. The test has a criterion that you have to score if you don't want to undergo remediation. That score, and I could flip it vice versa, is 350 or 351. And that's either 350, 51 on math or reading, or vice versa, reading and math. But that's the cut score. So look at this. 32 of all students, 32% met the criterion in reading, 23% in math, 18% in both. Now, wait a minute. Get this straight. These are graduates. These are not 10th grade students. I'm sorry, that's pretty dramatic. They're not 10th grade students or 11th grade students trying to work their way through. These are students that we've handed a diploma. Look at the African American. The average African American per score on reading in math in 17-18, the average score was below the criterion score of passing. What this shows is a systemic lack of confidence. Oh, they're not, Higher Education Court Board, it's not going to put out a press release that says the Texas Higher Education Court Board has a historic systemic lack of confidence in the TEA. I don't do their public relations. I would write that, but they won't. But this is what that is. Okay. Go to the bottom line. Met criterion in both. 18.1% translates to 82%. 11% for African American translates to 89%. And so on, and so on, and so on. This shows the numbers that met criterion. Even Jethro Bodine can subtract 100 from this and get the enormous impact of the human tragedy. Graduates that have gotten a diploma, who have been passed on class after class, grade after grade. Maybe they go through an individual graduation committee. Maybe they don't. Maybe they were ones that passed the test and didn't have to take that test again because of the cut scores that we've shown. There's all kinds of ways that the state can can put makeup on the picture it's created. But when you come to grips with these kinds of numbers, what you see is that the result of not taking care of at-risk, disadvantaged students, statistically dominated by children of color, has a consequence. And this is a consequence. And it also has another conclusion. I've said before, and you know that, we talk about at-risk, disadvantaged students of color, but look at the white, look at the Asian in this mix. You remember that table we did really early on, where we talked, we had 2009-10. We don't have the dollars yet to do the 2010, 11, 12. We're looking at something here from 2017-18 that is a systemic test of the vast majority of graduates to whom our focus is on. And that SAT, where we did it by disaggregation, by ethnicity, and by college entrance scoring, everything that we have discussed, everything that we have seen in today's chronological order here, everything that we've done and said today gives weight and meaning to what we did way back in program 1 and program 2. We've created a narrative tale, and we've saved these kinds of metric discussions to help put everything in context as we close out this series. Hopefully there'll be another one.
Incredible. So when we try to visualize these data then, Mr. Scott, what we see are in green, the number of graduates who took the TSI-A and who met the state criterion on both reading and math. We see the large percentages of those who took the TSI-A and who were below the criteria, again, which were 350 in math and 351 in reading. And then in black, of course, is the percentages of graduates who did not take the TSI-A.
Did you see the note that just came across?
No, go for it.
No, only on level students take the TSI test. I'm not worried. We'll double check. Someone has just written something, but the report is the report, and we'll double check that.
Maybe we'll read it out right now. We appreciate Jorge Rodriguez with us, who's suggesting those TSI numbers are not accurate. They do not include the TSI equivalent passing, which includes SAT, ACT scores. Texas TSI passing rate is around 60%. Only on-level students take the TSI.
Well, let's emphasize. Are you talking to him?
No. This
okay. I want to emphasize that the numbers are pulled directly from the Tapper report. My discussions with individuals not employed by the TEA have confirmed that. Remember, I said at the start, I'm not making an all-encompassing note, because the TEA would not return to help me understand some of the nuances. But this report says, of the students who took the test, that percent made criterion. That's what the report says in an official state government. I'll do some follow-up. The fact that we're even mentioning this is to show how honest we are.
Tremendous. We see here a visualization of the data, both for the first 10 and for the second 10 in alphabetical order. And now, Mr. Scott, as in previous webinars, you've included a table that includes the percentages of various subsets of students who are found to be below grade level. This is prior to the pandemic. So this is an academic year, school year 2018-2019. And we see here that we're looking at 6th grade reading. Anything
what we did was just take the STAR score reports and produce it and focus on the percent below grade level. That's what this table does. The STAR report for that 6th grade reading, et cetera, and report on the percent below grade level, not the percent approaching, but the percent below grade level.
Okay. Here we start seeing, as in previous webinars, except that this time we have all 20, the top 20 Latinx serving districts side by side in alphabetical order. Those that are colored in black failed the 6th grade reading test. Those in white are at grade level. So this gray area, as we've noted in past webinars, are the percentages of students who passed the STAR test, but who are found to be below grade level. Anything,
Correct.
Mr. Scott, that you care to
No, I think this is going back into the data that we've done consistently over time. I do want to go back to the TSIA, since we have an individual who has raised a question. I will follow up on that. Absolutely, period, paragraph, end of story. My conversations have been with some pretty high level education officials, and I will go back and double check. And if we need to make any kind of adjustment whatsoever, we will. In no way do I believe in any important way does it affect the inherent integrity or credibility of the bottom line conclusions. But if there is a nuance that needs to be noted, that nuance will be noted.
Good. In the meantime, Mr. Scott, can you tell us, for those who are wondering where these numbers that we're seeing come from, can you can you give us an idea for those who are wondering where these numbers might come from that you've put into this table, where it is that a person could find?
It comes directly from the Texas Academic Performance Review Board.
The paper report.
Yes, I mean, it's just directly downloading it. Anyway, if you can do this in live time.
There you go.
If I can get to my screen is full, and I don't know exactly how to. Oh wait, exit full screen. There we go.
There you go.
No, let's keep on going with the discussion.
Okay. So we were to, let's see, 6th grade reading. We see similar graphs, this time breaking it down by race and ethnicity. For every set of bar charts for each district, we see 4 bars. The first is for Asian students, then white students, then Latinx students, then African American students. We start to see the gaps that exist in 6th grade reading by race and ethnicity. After that, we see the same for the gaps between not at-risk students, which is the first bar for each district, and at-risk students, which is the second bar for each district. What we note here are the very low percentages of at-risk 6th graders who are at grade level in reading in the top 20 districts. We ask ourselves, well, that's 6th grade. We have several more years to work with them. So let's fast forward and see how we're doing by the time that we get to English 2. Are we closing those gaps between not at risk and at-risk students? We'll go back to 6th grade one more time so we see the difference. In 6th grade, we saw much higher, we saw the gaps were not so great. But then again, when we click back to English 2, we see how it is that those gaps between not at risk and at-risk students have only continued to grow.
Can I share a screen with you for a second?
Sure. Let me just pause our screen sharing. Go for it. Oops, let me enable the screen sharing.
I'm not seeing how to do it. I'm not seeing.
Try it again.
I'm not seeing share screen.
Seems on this side that we've enabled it for you.
Ah, now I do. You see that?
We do.
This is the state of Texas, Texas Success Initiative Participation Annual Graduates. That says how many of the annual graduates participated in the TSIA. The TSIA average score for those years and the percent meeting percent of graduates equaling criterion. That's where the numbers came from. Okay. Bottom line, that is where the numbers came from.
Okay. From the taper reports we're understanding.
And the numbers matched up precisely, of course. So anyway,
So,
where do you think we ought to end it? We're about.
excellent question.
Oh no,
We're
we have a
almost
lot more
there.
time. I got
There we go.
distracted.
Carlos has helpfully tried to help us to visualize the gaps and whether the gaps are decreasing from one grade level to the next or increasing from one grade level to the next. So this gives an idea for the top 20 Latinx serving districts in Texas, how it is that not a single one of the top 20 Latinx serving districts in Texas is able to close the gap between at-risk and not at-risk students from one year to the next. We see a similar chart for math, except that here we do see some lines that are nearly level, meaning that the gaps that existed in third grade somewhat resemble those same gaps for some districts in the 8th grade, but we see in other districts, including my own, the Austin ISD, how it is that those gaps continue to grow from one year to the next. We're almost coming to the end of our PowerPoint. Here we have your table, Mr. Scott, on the top 20 Latinx serving districts and their success in getting students through higher education. This is for the high school graduating class of 2011. So the industry standard is, or the question that we ask is whether these students from the class of 2011 earned a degree or certificate within 6 years of graduating from high school. Mr. Scott, what should our eyes focus on in this table?
Well, I think that, let me get it back to a little bit more full screen. I think that what you see is that there is a profound difference between going to college and graduating from college, okay? And those that we put a lot of children into community college. And in particular, the economic disadvantaged children are dropping by the wayside. Even the four-year degrees, the ones earning four-year degrees are not as significant as the non-economic disadvantaged students. Moreover, the Higher Education Coordinating Board, and this one, is able to capture students who enroll outside of Texas. The other one, where you're talking about GPA rates or the other reports that we've done, include only students who go to Texas higher education. But using a national clearinghouse, they are able to up the number of graduates that they have tracked. I think this one, in the context of looking at eco disadvantaged and not, makes a very important point. And you can just look at it, okay? Ever enrolled, no degree or certificate. 45% of the state's graduates enroll, economically disadvantaged graduates enrolled. Of that, 42.8% never got a degree or certificate. That's what the numbers show.
Yeah.
If you could, I'd like to come back to share screen. I really would.
Okay. Go for it there, Mr. Scott.
This is from the glossary. I did leave one thing out, but it's not relevant in terms of who takes it, who doesn't. The Texas Success Initiative Assessment Participation Annual Graduates, the percentage of annual graduates who took the College Board's TSI at any point since June 2011, data source, the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, and the average score of annual graduates on the TSIA. The maximum score is 390, et cetera. So it does track the universe of graduates. If we need to make a nuance on that, we will, but that's what, that is what the data purports to track, and it's pulled directly from the Tapper report.
Okay. Appreciate that, Mr. Scott. Here, the dark gray bars represents, so there are 3 bars for every district, which represent all students of that district, non-economically disadvantaged students in the 2nd bar, and economically disadvantaged students in the 3rd bar. What's striking here are the large gray, the dark gray bars, which are the percentages of students in each of the top 20 Latinx serving districts, and we'll have to change the title there, who have, oh, I see, this is actually from last week's PowerPoint. Mr. Scott, I apologize that we didn't update
There you
that
go.
slide. There you go. So we said that we were turning the microscope on ourselves as part of this. We know that our board of advisors here in the Texas Latino School Boards Association is comprised of representatives of the top 20 Latinx serving districts in the state. And so if we were to turn the microscope on those districts, we have here some examples from the district that I represented and the district that you represented, Mr. Scott. I'll take a look first at the Austin ISD. Mr. Scott, you've helpfully shared with us data for every single high school in every one of these districts. So in the first chart, it allows us to see the numbers of students from each high school who go off to a Texas four-year institution in the dark green, who go off to a to a two-year Texas public college in light green, to other colleges or universities we see in yellow, and then in black, those who are not found in higher education. So it becomes interesting for us to be able to see from various high schools, what are the numbers of students that are going on to higher education? And then in the second bar chart, what we see are two bars for every high school, the top one being for those students who went off to four-year colleges, the bottom for those who went off to two-year colleges. The question becomes, how did they do? How well did we prepare them for their post-secondary studies? How did they do after a single semester of post-secondary studies? That by GPA, then we see it coded from red to dark green. In the Austin ISD, for instance, we'll see how it is that we have certain flagship schools like LASA, the Liberal Arts and Science Academy in Austin, which sends large numbers of students off who do extremely well in post-secondary studies. We also have other high schools I'm seeing like Eastside Memorial High School, which is in my single member district, which has very small numbers of students going off into four-year colleges and universities, and those who go off into two-year colleges and universities. All of that red suggests that they were likely on academic probation or failing out of college by the end of their first semester. We'll take a look at the second set of charts, which is for the Katy ISD. You know that district a little better, Mr. Scott. What do you see?
Katy ISD is a very dramatically, it has very dramatic differences in student composition, most notable between campuses. But I will say this, even though I'm from Katy and I am harsh and critical of it in some ways, if you sort Katy, it still is up in the higher level for most metrics. But the key thing is this: Katy ISD is not insulated from high college dropout rates, high failure rates among at-risk students and economically disadvantaged students. I guess the thing I would say about Katy is this: it absolutely proves, because there are economically advantaged students of all ethnicity in Katy going to the schools and topping off the test. This table would show that. But there are schools that have more challenge. And you do see at campuses that they have GPA performance problems. There's a difference between Seven Lakes High School and Maid Creek High School. There's a difference between Tompkins and Morton Ranch. So even though the mean scores overall may look more positive when you're looking at district, the district still has profound issues with at-risk, economically disadvantaged children of ethnicity that have economic disadvantaged issues. So Katy, if we look at Katy in 10 years, you won't be seeing the same district. I'm pretty sure of that. Katy is a changing district, perhaps even more so than neighboring Fort Bend, which has already undergone some pretty dramatic change.
The other thing that strikes me, which is somewhat unrelated to the topic at hand, but is simply, we see in the Katy ISD 7 high schools with more than 600 students, large high schools we see. In
Yes.
the Austin ISD, what we notice are a number of high schools, for instance, that's over 600 graduates. Here we have high schools in Austin with less than 100 graduates, with just over 100 graduates, with less than 200 graduates. We have a lot of small high schools here, and there's a real resistance to consolidating high schools. We know that the student population in the Austin ISD has decreased by over 6,000 students during the past 10 years. And so some change needs to be done. It's interesting to take a look at these data that you've brought together by high school, Mr. Scott.
Well, and that's part of the story. You can look at the statewide data, and if you have a high average school district, it doesn't answer all the questions about the different components of that school district. And certainly that comes into play in Katy. Katy, historically, I've been here since 1983. Katy has not gone the Houston ISD route or other routes. We do not have lots of schools within schools. We have schools that are the major high schools. Most become 5A pretty quickly, and I think we're all 6A right now. And they have different compositions, but I think historically Katy has been very attentive to trying to have uniform standards, a uniform approach to excellence. They don't always succeed, and I'm not trying to make any friends in Katy. That's not going to happen. But I'm just saying we can learn a lot from Katy because it has grown differently than some school districts. And the key is wherever these kids go, if they're going to a campus that has 50 or 60% at-risk minority students, then that campus needs to get the same commitment to excellence as any other campus. Houston ISD is renowned for having schools within schools, tiny schools, that some of those schools have outstanding performance, but they represent a fractional percent of the student body.
So, Mr. Scott, concluding words with the 2 minutes that we have left, thoughts, call to action?
My situation from my personal standpoint is I know what it takes to take this to the next level. This has been an extraordinary 8 weeks. We've done things that have not been done before. But the truth of the matter is that unless we can find the support to take the concept of equity at individual school districts more seriously, to hold individual school districts more accountable, then it's going to be a program. It's going to be a series of 8 webinars. It's going to be a lot of discussion, a lot of analysis. But if we can't take it to the next level, it's going to be sad. There's never been anything produced like we have produced. And the tragedy will be if, having produced that finally, that we can't find the support to take it to the next level. That's what I hope.
Same here. We certainly would just want to pause and thank you, Mr. Scott, for all the data that you've been sharing with us here at the Texas Latino School Boards Association. We want to thank all who've joined us for these 8 weeks. These webinars have been absolutely fascinating and eye-opening. Mr. Scott?
No, I'm just saying, why don't you give me a call when you get through? I mean, when we're off.
Be happy to. Just want to thank you all for tuning in. This monograph then on the top 20 Latinx serving districts can be found then at our website, tlsba.org/research. We'll look forward to continuing to provide research in the future. We'll look forward to future webinars, but we'll also look forward to seeing how it is that all of us can join together as champions for our students and for all who serve them in our Texas public schools. Thank you, Mr. Scott, and thank you all for joining us.
It's been fun.
Have a great day. And for Trustee Rodriguez, we did put the PowerPoint into the chat box as well. So all who are joining us today, we'll give you a moment to be able to download that PowerPoint presentation. And if not, simply follow up with us. We'll be happy to help you. My email address is Jamie with a Y, Jayme at tlsba.org. Again, that's Jamie, Jayme at tlsba.org. Thank you, Mr. Scott. Thank you to all who joined us. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Take care.